Flipkart, India's e-commerce pioneer Walmart bought. In October 2007, two Indian engineers working at Amazon made a decision that would forever change the landscape of e-commerce in India. Sachin Bansal and Binny Bansal, no relation despite sharing the same surname, were earning comfortable salaries at one of the world's largest online retailers, but they saw something Amazon couldn't see at the time. They recognized that India's massive population of over 1 billion people represented an untapped goldmine for online commerce, despite the country's challenging infrastructure, limited internet penetration, and cash dominated economy. Working from a cramped two-bedroom apartment in Bangalore, with an initial investment of just 4 lakh rupees, approximately $5,000, these two 20-something engineers launched Flipkart as an online bookstore. Their first sale came 10 days after launch when Sachin himself purchased a book titled Leaving Microsoft to Change the World, using a friend's credit card to test their system. The irony wasn't lost on them, two engineers leaving Amazon to change the world of Indian commerce. What started as a simple online bookstore would grow into India's largest e-commerce platform, eventually attracting a $16 billion acquisition offer from Walmart, the world's largest retailer, making it the biggest deal in Indian corporate history at the time. The India that Sachin and Binny decided to conquer in 2007 was vastly different from the digital marketplace we know today. Internet penetration stood at a mere 7%, with only 70 million users out of India's billion-plus population having access to the web. Credit card ownership was even more dismal, with less than 2% of Indians possessing plastic money. The logistics infrastructure was fragmented and unreliable, making the idea of delivering products across the country seem almost impossible. Most Indians preferred touching, feeling, and bargaining for products in physical stores, viewing online shopping with deep suspicion. Amazon had actually explored the Indian market years earlier but decided against entry, deeming it too complex and premature for e-commerce. Jeff Bezos himself had visited India in the early 2000s but concluded that the market wasn't ready for Amazon's model. This skepticism wasn't limited to foreign companies. Most Indian businesses and investors believed that e-commerce couldn't work in a country where relationships and personal interactions drove commerce, where cash was king, and where the majority of the population lived in rural areas with limited connectivity. The Bansals saw opportunity where others saw obstacles, understanding that India's challenges weren't permanent barriers but temporary conditions that would change with the right approach and patience. Flipkart's early days were marked by relentless bootstrapping and creative problem solving that would become hallmarks of their approach to building an empire in India's unique market conditions. The founders initially funded operations by maxing out their personal credit cards and borrowing money from family members, operating with such tight margins that they personally packaged and delivered books to customers in Bangalore. Their first office was the two-bedroom apartment they shared, with one room serving as the warehouse, stocked with books they purchased from distributors and publishers. By the end of their first year, they had achieved sales of 40 lakh rupees, roughly $50,000, proving that there was indeed demand for online shopping in India, even if it was still niche. The breakthrough came when they realized that replicating Amazon's model wouldn't work in India, and they needed to innovate around the country's unique constraints. They introduced cash on delivery in 2010, a revolutionary concept that allowed customers to pay for products only after receiving them, eliminating the need for credit cards and building trust among skeptical consumers. This single innovation opened up the market to millions of Indians who had been excluded from online commerce, transforming Flipkart from a small online bookstore to a platform that could serve the masses. They also built their own logistics network, partnering with local courier services and eventually creating their own delivery system called eCart because they couldn't rely on existing infrastructure to provide the customer experience they envisioned. The transformation from bookstore to everything store began in earnest in 2010, as Flipkart expanded into electronics, mobile phones, clothing, and eventually almost every product category imaginable. This expansion required significant capital, and the Bansals proved masterful at attracting investors who shared their vision of India's e-commerce potential. Their first major funding round came in 2009 when Accel Partners invested $1 million, followed by a $10 million round in 2010. What set Flipkart apart wasn't just their willingness to adapt to Indian conditions, but their ability to create innovations that would later be adopted globally. They pioneered the concept of no questions asked returns, offering 30-day return policies when most Indian retailers didn't even accept returns.
They introduced EMI options for expensive products, allowing customers to pay in installments, making smartphones and electronics accessible to middle-class Indians. Their customer service became legendary, with representatives going above and beyond to solve problems, personally calling customers to resolve issues, and sometimes even hand-delivering replacements. By 2012, Flipkart had become India's largest e-commerce platform, processing over 5 million shipments monthly and employing more than 4,000 people. They achieved a gross merchandise value of $100 million, proving that e-commerce could scale in India with the right approach and execution. The period from 2012 to 2015 marked Flipkart's emergence as a true empire, but also introduced the competitive pressures that would define the Indian e-commerce landscape for years to come. Amazon finally decided to enter India in 2013, bringing its global expertise and Jeff Bezos' commitment to invest $5 billion in the Indian market. This created an epic battle between the homegrown champion and the global giant, with both companies burning cash to acquire customers and build market share. Flipkart responded by raising increasingly larger funding rounds, including a $1 billion round in 2014 that valued the company at $7 billion, making it India's first unicorn startup. They acquired competitors like Myntra for $300 million, building a portfolio of brands that could compete across different segments. The company pioneered the concept of mobile-first commerce in India, recognizing that most Indians would access the internet through smartphones rather than computers. They launched mobile apps that worked seamlessly on low-end Android devices with poor internet connections, capturing users who were coming online for the first time. Their Big Billion Days sale events became cultural phenomena, with millions of Indians participating in discount festivals that generated hundreds of millions in sales over just a few days. By 2015, Flipkart was processing over 8 million shipments per month, had expanded to over 100 cities, and achieved a gross merchandise value exceeding $3 billion annually.
However, the relentless cash burn and intense competition began taking their toll on Flipkart's valuation and investor confidence between 2015 and 2017. The company faced multiple down rounds, with investors marking down their stakes as losses mounted and Amazon gained market share through aggressive pricing and Prime membership benefits. Internal conflicts emerged as the board brought in external CEOs, first Kalyan Krishnamurthy from Tiger Global, while the founders stepped back from day-to-day operations. Sachin Bansal left his operational role in 2016, while Binny remained as group CEO but with reduced control over the company they had built. The competition with Amazon intensified as both companies spent billions on discounts, marketing, and logistics infrastructure, leading to questions about the sustainability of the Indian e-commerce model. Flipkart's valuation dropped from a peak of $15 billion to around $10 billion as investors grew concerned about the path to profitability and Amazon's relentless expansion. The company struggled with leadership transitions, strategic direction, and the constant pressure to show growth while managing costs. Despite these challenges, Flipkart maintained its position as India's largest e-commerce platform by gross merchandise value, continuing to process over 10 million monthly shipments and serving over 100 million registered users. The founders and early investors began exploring exit strategies, including potential IPOs and strategic acquisitions, as the company matured and faced the reality of competing with one of the world's most powerful companies in Amazon. The game-changing moment came in early 2018 when Walmart, the world's largest retailer with over $500 billion in annual revenue, decided that acquiring Flipkart was essential to their global strategy and their competition with Amazon. Doug McMillon, Walmart's CEO, recognized that India represented the last major e-commerce market where Amazon didn't dominate, and that Flipkart's local expertise, brand recognition, and market position made it the perfect vehicle for Walmart's Indian ambitions. The acquisition negotiations were complex, involving multiple stakeholders including SoftBank, Tiger Global, Accel Partners, and the founders themselves, each with different priorities and expectations. Walmart ultimately agreed to acquire a 77% stake in Flipkart for $16 billion, valuing the entire company at over $20 billion and making it the largest acquisition in Walmart's history and the biggest deal in Indian e-commerce. The deal represented a massive vindication for the Bansals and their early investors, generating returns that exceeded most venture capital firms' wildest expectations. Accel Partners, which had invested $1 million in 2009, saw returns of over $1 billion, representing one of the highest returning venture investments in history. The acquisition gave Flipkart access to Walmart's global supply chain expertise, purchasing power, and retail knowledge, while providing Walmart with a ready-made platform to compete with Amazon in the world's fastest-growing major economy. Sachin Bansal sold his entire stake to Walmart for over $1 billion, while Binny retained a small position and continued as Group CEO to oversee the transition and integration with Walmart's global operations. The Walmart acquisition transformed Flipkart from an Indian startup to a global e-commerce powerhouse backed by one of the world's largest corporations, but it also marked the end of an era for homegrown Indian entrepreneurship in the sector. Under Walmart's ownership, Flipkart accelerated its expansion into grocery delivery through Flipkart Grocery and strengthened its logistics capabilities by integrating with Walmart's global supply chain network. The company launched Flipkart Wholesale, targeting the massive Indian B2B market, and expanded its fintech offerings through PhonePe, India's leading digital payments platform that processed over 1 billion transactions monthly. Walmart's backing provided the financial stability and strategic resources that Flipkart needed to compete long-term with Amazon, removing the pressure for short-term profitability and allowing focus on market expansion and customer experience. The acquisition also triggered a wave of consolidation in Indian e-commerce, as other players sought strategic partners and investors recognized the capital requirements for competing in the Indian market. Flipkart's gross merchandise value exceeded $10 billion annually by 2019, with over 300 million registered users and operations in over 4,000 cities and towns across India. The platform processed over 150 million shipments annually, employed over 30,000 people directly, and supported the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of sellers, delivery partners, and ecosystem participants. PhonePe became a separate entity valued at over $12 billion, proving that Flipkart's innovations extended beyond e-commerce into the broader digital economy. The Flipkart story represents one of the most remarkable examples of empire building in the modern digital economy, demonstrating how local entrepreneurs can compete with global giants by understanding their market better and innovating around local constraints rather than simply copying proven models from developed markets. From their 4 lakh rupee investment in a Bangalore apartment to a $16 billion acquisition by the world's largest retailer, Sachin and Binny Bansal proved that Indian entrepreneurs could build world-class technology companies that create massive value for all stakeholders. Their success paved the way for India's entire startup ecosystem, inspiring thousands of entrepreneurs and demonstrating to global investors that Indian companies could achieve unicorn valuations and successful exits. The innovations they pioneered, from cash on delivery to mobile-first commerce to hyperlocal logistics, have been adopted by e-commerce platforms worldwide and remain essential features of online retail in emerging markets. Flipkart's impact extends far beyond e-commerce, having created an entire ecosystem of suppliers, logistics partners, digital payment systems, and ancillary services that employed millions of people and contributed billions to India's GDP. Today, as India's e-commerce market approaches $100 billion in annual gross merchandise value, Flipkart remains the largest homegrown platform, serving over 400 million users and processing billions of dollars in transactions annually. The company continues to innovate in areas like social commerce, video shopping, and supply chain technology, while expanding into new categories like healthcare and travel. The Bansal brothers, despite no longer being involved in day-to-day operations, remain among India's most successful entrepreneurs and active investors in the country's startup ecosystem, having demonstrated that with the right vision, execution, and persistence, 2 engineers from middle-class families could build an empire that changed how over 1 billion people shop, pay, and interact with the digital economy.